everyone. I'm Ravi Gupta. I'm editor-in-chief of Banking and Finance Post. This is a magazine we have been publishing at Elets for last 7 years, and we have been organizing several conferences on the BFSI sector, various aspects of this sector across the country. Today, we are pleased to have this webinar, and we have an expert panel uh, here. Uh, all our panelists are veterans in the field of banking and finance sector, and we are going to discuss on the topic COVID-19 crisis, how is AI building the workforce for BFSI sector. We are going to talk about the situation in the during COVID and post-COVID world, how the BFSI sector is going to change, going to evolve, and how will be the role of AI and related technologies will gain more importance and relevance in this era. So I will request each of the panelists to start the discussions, and I will request that each of the panelists talk, uh, give their views initially for 4 to 5 minutes each on their perspective on how has the COVID impacted the BFSI sector, and specifically in the context of your organizations, and what is the way forward you are looking at. So I will request to start with Mr. Shiv Kumar Bhasin to start, please. Sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. See, COVID-19 is really kind of re-emphasizing the needs of digitizing the various business processes. It is for not just earlier people used to say the rationale of for digitizing the business processes was only the customer experience, which has been a very big buzzword in the financial services from quite some time, and people have been coming up with the various digital bank or digital front ends, and but it is really now some of the industrial journals I was reading, and there it was mentioned that by 2022, if we are able to catch up with 50 to 60% of the services to be digitized in the world, it will require cost expense of around $7 trillion. So there is a huge demand in terms of IT for digitizing the various services, as well as a lot of scope where the processes can be reimagined, leveraging the AI, RPA, or advanced analytics, machine learning kind of technologies, not only just to reimagine the experience, but also reimagining the end-to-end business processes in terms of cutting down the overall TAT, and making the processes much more smarter, more collaborative across the departments, cutting down the silos across the departments. And in terms of it is a there is a very subtle difference using the AI analytics, or using the straight away I should say the some kind of a mapping which you carry out for responding to any situation. If you have fixed logic in your any services, that if somebody says A, then the response will always be the the 26th letter of the this alphabet, and if somebody says B, then it is the 25th letter. So if there is a mapping straight away, then that is not the analytics. But analytics is that really looking at the contextual things to be picked up when the customer is speaking on the phone, capturing his voice analytics and capturing the emotions, and then the bot responding to him accordingly. And at the simultaneously, you picking up the details of the customer profile. Uh, be it as a banking area, be it as a FMCG or retail or maybe the loans, personal loans or housing loans or insurance, and uh, getting all the history of his past transaction relationship and adding the contextual knowledge along with it, and then responding appropriately. Sometimes you will find customer getting frustrated that he has tried to reach out 4 times to the contact center and all the time calls have failed, or he just got connected and it was the connection got broken. So you know that when fifth time the customer is reaching out, he will be really frustrated. So how to handle the scenario, and if you tell that we understand that you have been trying to reach us and there have been frequent disconnections, so then that will set a different context when they start the conversation, when you will start the conversation with the customer. So there is so like that there are many things today where people are now recognizing
Is another link now?
when they have been compulsory push to remote. Now, when the when the staff has been compulsory pushed to work from remote, we are realizing that what are the business processes or keeping the lights on the production. How much staff is required? Though government might have put restrictions at 5% staff, but not every time. A lot of places you will be finding that a lot of organizations have taken residential premises or hotels or nearby their offices to host the staff, and probably a lot of those are staying since last 8 weeks away from their families, taking care of keeping the lights on of the various financial services organizations. So there, a lot of gaps are getting detected, that processes could have been digitized. Now coming to the further AI in the now when you are working remotely, so there is a very big factor called trust between the supervisor and the staff. And a lot of our Indian top leadership or management staff is very used to seeing the people on the floor, and remote working brings kind of a mistrust, because out of sight out of mind kind of situation is there. And so how to have a trust with the staff. So there is a there are multiple things, like when we are working with various collaboration technologies, be it is a 360 Office 365 and various tools of 365, whether Teams, SharePoint, or be it the WebEx or Zoom, whichever technologies you are using in your respective organizations, all of them have got some analytics put in place. Where you will know that how many meetings are happening, how many, what are the typical duration of those meetings, who have attended those meetings. And similarly, when you are using any remote enabled workspaces, be it is a Citrix or Horizon from VMware, or remote desktops. So all of these tools are also nowadays have a productivity suites, and those productivity suites are talking about how much they may be still very rudimentary. Which may be talking about how much time the teams have spent while working on one particular application. So you may not know very intrusively. And there are some intrusive tools as well, which may sometimes bring down the motivation of the staff as well. So it is up to us basically that how do we design the work from home target operating environment, which is more outcome driven than monitoring driven, and those outcomes need to be reviewed. So these tools are all based on analytics, various kinds of machine learning or AI. They are giving us very rich analytics, and further this data can be crunched terms of seeing that what is the various work-life balance factors are there while staff is working from remote, what are the productivity enhancements area, where what are the, now how to do the carry out the estimations of efforts so that the efficient deliveries can be ensured in day to day. So all those things are, all these are the areas where the various data and analytics captured from here is going to help us to make the environments more productive. And I think, needless to say, as I think has already, Mr. Nitant has already mentioned that there are already a lot of AI analytics is in use if you look, but there are opportunities as well. Like if we have done the loan origination processes partly only for certain product lines, I'm sure that all the NBFCs and all must be fighting the pinch that some of the processes which they have not uh, carried out digital, they must be finding that they should have done it more aggressively, because now those underwriting of those products is not possible because the data is not getting captured using any kind of a OCR, and then using the AI analytics further to underwrite the applications. So there are various examples, various use cases, be it is a productivity, be it is a experience and reimagining the processes.
Right. Thank you, Shiv Kumar Bhasin ji, and welcome Sreeram.
Thank
Sreeram,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, can you
Am
hear
I
me?
audible, Sreeram?
Yes, you are. Yeah. And apologies,
So,
I had difficulty getting in.
no issues. I think thanks for joining. We have just started, and I have requested each of the panelists to give their views about the changed scenario because of the COVID-19 on the overall BFSI sector, and what is the emerging role of IT and AI in this situation. So, Mr. Shiv Kumar Bhasin has just spoken, and I'm requesting Manu to please give your perspective on this topic. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Ravi. I think it's a very interesting time, all of us, because see, when we look at the experience of technology and digital on a Sunday evening, it has traditionally been very, very different than what we experience on the Monday morning. Because somehow we became far more receptive to digital technologies in our personal lives than we were actually in our professional lives. Somehow the corporate world always was a bit behind in that experience. And I think what COVID has done is just accelerated the journey of the two worlds coming together. Because of the whole issue of distancing, there is a significant change not only in the processes, but also, as Mr. Shiv very, very nicely mentioned, mindsets, orientations, governance. All those dimensions are getting fundamentally challenged in terms of how do you drive remote sales, how do you drive remote governance, how do you drive remote training, how do you drive remote execution, right? And all that has led to a slightly higher dependence on digital tools than one was predisposed before COVID. The second big change, if you would see, that COVID has driven is, as Mr. Shiv rightly mentioned, the whole idea of trust, the whole idea of verification from a distance. So more and more, the dependence is on the surrogates than on the human conversation. More and more, the dependence is on implicit data about an individual that can be received and can be analyzed than what I would otherwise get if I was sitting in front of the person, right? So distancing by itself has led to a lot of those applications of technology in getting surrogates of understanding a customer, first of all, right? Understanding an employee. If we broadly take the idea of digital transformation and look at three pillars, what I call as intelligence, experience, and efficiency, right? I think COVID is transforming each one of them in a significant way. When we are looking at the question of efficiency, it's more about, am I able to drive the similar outcome that I was trying to do pre-COVID? And where does automation fit in? Where does really, figuring out remote work process management, remote monitoring, remote assessing of outcomes, governance, the entire piece around efficiency. Then there's a big change around the whole customer experience, and I think one industry that's really facing that big change is insurance, because selling of insurance was a hugely personal proposition, where an agent would go, would have a conversation. It's a fairly complex product, and ultimately you're selling a promise. So the sale itself is a trust. It's a promise that in case something happens, you're covered, right? And how do you then change that scenario to a scenario where there is no in-person conversation with the customer? How do you drive the entire connect digital? And digital is not just the communication being digital, but the digital is also, how do I get those surrogates from the customer that otherwise I had the flexibility of getting right there in front of the customer. I could get all the documents, I could underwrite the customer, and I could get a sense of whether it's an impaired life or an unimpaired life, and I can underwrite and risk assess my policy far better. And all those opportunities today are gone. Hence, technology is now stepping up to give solutions that, hey, how do I start getting those surrogates from the videos, from the documentation, whatever a human intelligence and a human eye could do, to really now figure out how does technology take care of that. So that is a transformation that we're talking about as far as the selling model is concerned. Internally in the organizations, we see even a more significant shift. Trust-based governance, people working from home. How do you drive a workforce of 14,000 people, 15,000 people, everybody working from home? How do you even drive the interactions? How do you motivate people? Because for sure, COVID has introduced this additional element of stress in all our minds. It's not status quo outside. How do you deal with those sensitivities? And that's where I think technology is coming on board as well, to figure out how do we drive virtual learning? How do we drive augmented learning? How do we drive AI-based programs where you can actually get the mental construct or how weary a person is on a call based on the facial recognition elements, right? So there are applications today that technology is disposing itself to that were never really, I would say, a sense of urgency was not there 4 months ago. But what COVID has done is it has put that sense of urgency in that entire digital transformation, right? And lastly, the customer experience dimension. It's again, the whole power of segment of one will become far more relevant today in the COVID world, because we will really need to understand the customer depth for the right segmentation, for the right risk profiling, but also to get those non-verbal cues, those inputs that otherwise I would get when I was sitting in front of a customer. How do we take similar inputs and assessment if I was sitting remote? So overall, much higher collaboration driven by technology, surrogates of customer knowledge, governance changes, and how do we enable and train people and inspire people in a remote framework. Some very secular changes that technology is bringing about.
Fantastic inputs. Thank you, Manu. May I request Desai to please give your perspective on the changes?
Hello. Good afternoon, panelists, and good afternoon, colleagues who are attending the webinar. The challenges that COVID has thrown is very, very high. We have all of a sudden been exposed from a back office to the front office now. IT is leading from the front instead of leading from the backend as it used to. Digital transformation in our country, or particularly in this space, particularly in BFSI space, whatever we did in last 1.5 to 2 years has crunched everything in this COVID-19 scenario, has brought and accelerated the entire process of digital transformation into the BFSI sector. And if I talk of particularly the lending part of it, it was largely the customer service were driven through a digital applications. But now sourcing, approval, etc. has also come into the forefront, and that has to be managed. We'll rather learn to manage them through digital way. Having said that, we are one of the very, particularly I'm talking of PNB Housing, we have managed this challenge very well, and we are a very process driven company. As a result, we had quite a few processes already defined for non-digital, and some of them are defined for digital. So we had to quickly make shift the changes in the process from a digital perspective and launch them. So as a result, today we could manage about 80% of our staff strength working from home, processing transactions, sourcing additional lead, processing new application, and of course serving the customer. Coming to AI part of it, largely, even if we talk of service being the AI being used in the service area, there are certain use cases which are not available for the service, which is the moratorium piece. Because RBI has announced a moratorium for all term loan customer. So their queries regarding moratorium, who will get it, who will not get it, what if I take it, what if I not take it, they are not use cases into AI into that, which is yet to be matured. So those cases are still handled out of away from the AI perspective. However, we will be more, technology should more focus on the digital journey now, more and more, because digital is the unavoidable channel that we get used to it, whether COVID or no COVID.
Sure. So digital is the new wave we all have to adopt and accelerate the usage. May I request Sreeram Iyer to please give your perspective, please. Yeah. Sreeram, you are not audible. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I
Yes,
hope
yes.
you can hear me now. Apologies,
Yes,
I
yes.
got in late into the session. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for listening in. I'm based in Singapore. Quick introduction. I'm part of ANZ Bank. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of our corporate banking business globally. I might make a few comments, and this is not to claim that what we have done is the right thing or the right way to go forward, but merely sharing. One is a perspective that because of COVID, and our presence in different countries, we had the advantage of an experience which moved from country to country. So China, of course, was nearly soon after Christmas, and then came Hong Kong, then came Singapore, and then was Italy, and then was Europe, and then was US, and now it's all over. So we could progressively, we got time to progressively learn as to how to respond from a crisis and banking management point of view, which was helpful. Otherwise, pandemics and response to pandemic probably featured, if at all, in slide number 83 and appendix number 4, somewhere in some fine print, but now that's come to the forefront. So we've had lessons learned out of that. We have a large shared service center in India, and as with all of you, 100% working from home, and that itself has accelerated the internal management process around decision making. Because time is not at your disposal, and so from a technology point of view, the tech teams have had to respond quite dramatically and quite quickly to enable this new way of working, which I think is a big lesson learned. And a subset of that lesson is what I might call minimum viable bureaucracy, so that you can take decisions and run the bank from in a tech point of view and keep the good parts of this crisis to our advantage. When I think of digital and AI and the impact on the business because of COVID, There are probably 4 quadrants in my mind. One is the customer lens and the customer entering the bank. And from a corporate bank point of view, you would understand when I say that generally banks and businesses like this invest hundreds of millions of dollars year after year after year on platforms and channels. And having done that with a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty, you then have to coax and incentivize customers to come onto the channel. And then you have to coax and incentivize them to start adopting the channel. And that's a long journey, and therefore your return on investment tends to be elongated. Whereas COVID has forced adoption from a channel point of view to an extent where our straight through rates of processing have shot through the roof. And that's again a good behavior change, which is enabled merely because of COVID. The other thing I'd say, looking internally now within the bank, apart from the customer, is the use of technology to manage the bank's internal machinery on a financial basis, such as liquidity or solvency or balance sheet or our credit exposures or the economic downturn or the supply chain. So the whole machine of how to run and maintain your books has got better done, or it is happening these days because of your investments made in the past on capabilities such as on data and analytics. The other third pillar, I would say, is inward-looking processing, efficiency, productivity, and I think Mr. Shiv Kumar Bhasin touched upon it as to how you're able to handle large volumes of transactions in a much more straight-through way, and the prior investments now have started to surface in the sense of a positive impact, where when you have thousands of people working from home and you still don't miss a single service level standard, that's because your internal processing machine has got tested and you're able to respond to that challenge. And the fourth pillar, I'd say, is from an employee point of view, which I think Manu mentioned, which is really the employee and staff engagement, which is on the one hand a challenge because of the nature of work having changed, but on the other hand, a positive outcome about the balance between work life, as it used to be, as we call it, work life balance, and now this opening up of opportunity where I was a person who had a relatively closed mind on this concept of work from home, but now I've opened my own readiness to adopt that model. And I think it'll help a lot of our employees, particularly the female folks who obviously take a lot of challenge on the personal side. So I think there are some very big positives on the technology enabling factor from an employee point of view, notwithstanding the stress and the other attendant anxiety that this thing has brought us upon. So I think if I compartmentalize it along those lines, from a customer, from a management of the books, from a good management practice and employee, and from productivity and efficiency, the combination of all of that, in my view at least, then helps to challenge how to deploy very precious capital on what kind of technology, AI, machine learning, data analytics, what is it that really pays off, and what is it which is a shiny toy which you actually don't get anything in return for. So that segregation has become much more stark now than ever before. It's a bit like saying that, in this situation of COVID, we have had, as you would have probably, you've had to assess who is really important in the bank to have to be enabled to work, whereas which roles are really all right if they don't actually work. They're sort of C4. And it's inverse to the management grade. The higher you go, the less important you are. You really want people who deal with customers to be well equipped. They're like frontline workers equivalent of the healthcare sector, and you want to invest in them and walk away a little bit, at least, from the pseudo importance that we have higher up the hierarchy. So I think that has also played up in this crisis. So many positives, not to waste a crisis. And if we can keep the minimum viable bureaucracy alive, I think it's a good combination for the future.
Great inputs, Sreeram. You have highlighted both the challenges and the opportunities. And let me ask, each of the speakers have touched upon the work from home, and it's a very important part of the whole discussion. So I will request each of the speakers to talk about work from home, how it is like how do you see it keep on being there post COVID also, and if it is, how much percentage of it in the your organizations may employees may actually adopt it, and how what are the cyber security challenges, what are the other operational issues it will throw up, which never were there till now. So may I request Mr. Shiv Kumar Bhasin to talk about it, please.
Yeah, see, work from home actually varying like what Sreeram mentioned. So many, multinational organizations had the work from home or work from remote, uh, maybe last 20-year plus, because just the face of the technologies were changing, starting from the audio conferencing to the video, and then the WebEx, and all the Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all. In different 5-year interval, different set of technologies keep on coming into the market in last 20 years, and it is, I think, some of the Indian organizations who are purely domestic, they are waking up now that work from home is a new phenomena, and they started, some of them, for the diversity purposes or some kind of a very extreme needs, but then also very restrictive processes or restrictive services were made available to the people to work from home. Again, one that that people, as I said, that which is one of the great factor plays, that out of mind, out of sight, and there was not much focus on building such infrastructure in Indian companies. Largely, if any money needs to be put, they would like to put where the on the business processes or automating the business processes, rather than making the work-life balance better, or making the productivity better, because the concern is that same, that everything has to happen on the shop floor, face to face. So this is, I think, a lot of awakening call for the Indian organizations. For us as well, we did not have the work from home, and now when we started working for work from home since 13th or 10th of March, uh, then just before lockdown, we could get around 50% of the staff, sorry, moved out to the work remote. Then I think by the end of the 31st March, we had the 100% people working from home. And all the services being available, rather than the partial services earlier, which were the case. So there have been a major learning as well, because it is not just you send people home by enabling some of the desktops or services. I think you have to get them digital savvy as well. So the culture change is a big area where they need to understand what is the operating model, how to, what are the different etiquettes to work from remote, how to be effective and productive while working from remote. So a lot of cultural trainings I have started conducting in my organization to making the people more effective, as well as adoption of the these tools, because a lot of people were not aware of the various features, like typically brainstorming of whiteboarding was not possible, how to do it, and we have to organize various offsites, most of our consecutive weekends, to showcase that you can use the whiteboarding on the tools. If you are not, even if it is not possible, you find the Microsoft Word or PowerPoint can be shared. And you come better prepared in the meetings. So coming prepared in the meetings was not the culture. Just when you are working on the floor, you will just walk into the meeting. So a lot of those things have gone in. Coming to the security aspect, there is we have enabled the multi-factor authentication for the normal users. We have done based on the OTP, while for the privileged users, we have done using biometrics out of band as well. Using the mobile-based biometrics or mobile-based facial recognition is being used for the privileged users. Be it as a IT operations, be it as a business operations. So wherever the multiple level of authorizations are involved, the biometric is taken into place. And we have gone to a lot of cloud security model lately. We have been working on 6-7 months on that. That has helped us a lot. Because being now, they know that there's no need, the hackers know that there's no need to any financial systems or the services which we were exposing to the B2B or to our end customers. They know now if they can they can attack our the internet facing bandwidth or the internet facing work from home or work from remote networks. They can bring down the entire operation in your organization. So there have been a lot of security we have put on the cloud, so that various layers of firewalls or WAFs we are running out of the cloud. DDoS attacks. We have experienced actually every week various DDoS attacks on our work from home networks, because they knew that if the exchange can be brought down, by just slashing the the nerve of the exchange, which is work from home and where people are executing the transactions working from remote. So we have multiple providers who are scrubbing the DDoS attacks for us, and so we have been working on those, and there are fortunately we did not have a issue, but some of our partners have faced ransomware attacks as well during these days. So what we give credit to the multi-layer security, which is a cloud and on-premise, both we have kept on. So that's how we are trying to prevent ourselves.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bhasin, for insights on the cyber security and the cyber attacks due to the this situation of work from home. Mr. Desai, your perspective on this work from home and the challenges and opportunities it is going to bring.
Yes, as I have said earlier, we could successfully migrate 80% of our staff strength to work from home solution, which is certainly a strength. Now I'll first talk of the opportunity. Yes, it has certainly given, taught us to be positive that work from home can be leveraged in order to bring down certainly your operating cost. And I'm sure my CFO colleagues and CFO fraternity will be very happy with this kind of an initiative, because this will certainly bring our cost ratios, etc., down. So that certainly is an opportunity. However, the kind of business that we are into, which is a lending business, and that to mortgage, where, as I have told earlier, that there are certain processes which cannot be completely managed through work from home. Interaction with customers, one visit of customer or one personal visit with the customer is inevitable in order to get the contract signed, in order to create the mortgage, which we will have to continue to do it. So we'll have to really take a very prudent and a conscious call in which part of the and how to really culturally align to this new way of working, which is work from home. and certainly according to me should be leveraged. So challenges, as I have told you, there are certain processes which cannot be managed in a work from home situation, continues to be operative in a real world till the land revenue records in the country gets digitized. Coming to cyber security, so far so good for PNB Housing. We have been managing very successfully the attacks which has been made by the hackers. Certainly the number of attacks have increased ever since the work from home has started, but we have been successfully managing them because of our product that we use, which is online real time, which gives us the threats. We also get from a similar platform the what is happening in the security world. So we are certain IDs and certain IPs, we are blocking them proactively as well. So far it is good, but security is an ever evolving and a very, very dynamic thing. So we have to take things as it comes to, rather than being bullish and being literal, I would say, arrogant about it, that we have been managing successfully and will continue to. Yes, but endeavor, and there is a way to do it. We have the current situation has at least taught us that.
The other part of the question was that will the work from home be adopted partially in your organization after the COVID?
Certainly it will be.
Great. So requesting Manu to please speak about your perspective on these issues.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Ravi. See, if I look at the idea of this transition to work from home in Max Life specifically, so within about 6 days of the lockdown getting announced, we were able to repair our operations and start operating in the new model, right? And I believe that there was definitely a much heightened security posture, because we had to invest in certain endpoint security tools. We had those already in place, but we had to make it more and more widely available to people, right? There were investments made from a security perspective, right? That's one. The second dimension of the change that work from home brought was around efficiency and governance. I think some of us touched that earlier in the discussion as well. How do we figure out that our processes from a TAT perspective, from an efficiency perspective, are running the same way as they're working from work from home? So we had to put in certain governance models, certain measurements, matrices over and above that what we would do in a typical process, to evaluate whether the work from home, what sort of an impact. And I think April just got completed, and from an overall business perspective, we were up at about 80% of what we did last year at the same time, right? So I think that piece has been taken care of in the sense of reaching a steady state from work from home. A big part of the efficiency has been through tools, through assets, through training, learning, in making people digitally aware, because digital is as a mindset as it is technology, right? And I think Mr. Shiv mentioned it very beautifully, that it's not just a question of providing a tool, it's a question of also changing the mindset. And the biggest change, I would say, and the biggest challenge that I would say that we see is cultural, because people have been so used to seeing each other right across the table. My women colleagues, see the way they are dealing with work from home, the way the families are dealing with work from home. There are parents to take care of, their children to take care of. Everybody is at home, right? The crashes are not working. So yes, is it a more stressful time for employees? Absolutely. And hence the amount of connect that we used to have in pre-COVID areas has gone up multifolds in the post-COVID era. There are multiple weekly connects. There are pulse surveys. There are touch points that are happening across the organization to get a sense of how people are feeling with their personal and professional lives, pretty much getting intermingled completely as far as time zones are concerned, right? So there is a big challenge around dealing with that change, that shift, dealing with the expectation that you need not be on a call always, and even if you're on a call, it's okay if you don't have your video on. because the sense of performance anxiety, even putting a video on, puts on people, right? We are discovering all those changes, all those challenges as we speak. But the biggest thing that we have learned from a change management perspective is driving empathy. It's okay for people to take time to learn the new regime. It's okay for people to have the empathy that I have a personal world that I have to take care of, and now the two worlds coexist at the same place at the same time. That's the mindset change, I believe, is a bigger challenge. It's a bigger problem as far as work from home is concerned. Financially, makes great sense. Will Max Live permanently make some decisions for work from home post-COVID? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, our resolve got even more strengthened when we had work from home very sporadically done in one department in the firm, and that was the only department whose efficiency levels never changed at all. They just remained at 95 plus when COVID happened and before COVID. So the learning for everyone was, hey, they're the only one that are most ready for it anyway, because it happened in the past. They were used to the whole work from home model. So in the order of priority of challenge, security tooling is a slightly easier challenge, efficiency around the same level, but cultural changes. That would be a big part as far as transformation to work from home is concerned.
Great. Thank you, Manu. Sreeram, your perspective, you had already touched upon it, but I'm asking about that. Will it stay after this is over? Security issues, cultural issues, your perspective.
Thank you, and I must say I related a lot to what Manu just said, and I'll try not to repeat because I could connect with what you were saying. I think there are two broad perspectives. One is what we are going through in the midst of the crisis and the work from home impact while it is still around us, and then the other one is what it might look like after it's sort of settled, and what are the good parts that we might look for. The second one is more difficult, actually. The first one is initially first a crisis reaction. Now it's a logistical matter, and you want to, take it carefully and cautiously from a customer and business point of view, and all of that is going the right way. But the longer you elongate the need to work from home under an extended COVID scenario, you start to invite anxiety around matters like staff stress, staff fatigue, staff absenteeism, or this powerful point that I would have also mentioned, which is the commingling of your personal life and professional life, which always was kept by and large compartmentalized, and that's come now together. So there is a big factor about the elongation of time under the scenario of COVID, which will impact work from home in a negative way potentially. From a banking point of view, from a security perspective, I do think that, at least a person like me, I do lose sleep about what could go wrong, because we are relying on hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions going through people's homes. I don't mean they are insecure, but the fact is that the infrastructure has to keep pace with that requirement. The subset of that is that you have many automation tools that you've deployed over the years in different countries, and they might be in large shared services, and you want all of them to be running with the absence of a control room. Earlier, you had the comfort of a large, a control room, so to say, which you visualize. You get to touch and feel what is happening where and what could go wrong where, and there are traffic lights all over the place. But this thing is now a distributed model. So when you think about anti-money laundering checks, when you think of sanctions filters, when you think of client frauds that are potentially have to be caught, if you like, when you think of inter-staff loosening of controls, when you think of post-fact metrics around where your books are heading towards, all those draw a new level of challenge, because you still have to be under control in this distributed model. So I think there is a pressure point when it comes to operational risk matters. To take the hundreds and thousands of bots that must be running, you'll have many machine learning capabilities that are running in different businesses. All of them have to continue to run, but you don't have the comfort of a dashboard in front of you. So there is a managerial challenge around it equally. The the other way I would think about it post-COVID, or let's say once it is eased off, is to lift the good parts of what this is teaching us. And one of the good parts is what Manu said, which is really how does it help our employees? We had this phrase called plug and play, and that was more from a platform point of view or a customer to your system point of view. But this is now an employee plug and play, where you can't just unplug and stay. You got to still plug and play in a work from home situation. There is also this learning that what is BCP is not equal to BAU. You cannot and should not expect life to be the same if you're operating in such a large extended BCP scenario. The last point I'd make is the big opportunity that things like travel are quite overrated, that people have come to realize. And on Shiv Kumar's Bhasin's point about whiteboarding through toolkits, etc., what were traditional reasons are not that powerful anymore. At least they have got diminished a little bit. So to embark on what at least we tend to call as creating digital minds and using the time to deploy learning learning avenues to people where at their time in their home environment is probably another positive thing. So I suppose in summary, I'd say there are tougher challenges in the current scenario and the elongation of time, but in the longer term or in the medium term, hopefully not longer term, the positives outweigh the challenges of today.
Great. Thank you, Sreeram. You almost mentioned about the positives, and I was going to ask the last question to the panel, that is the COVID-19 crisis a blessing in disguise for the BFSI sector? It's a provocative question. So I'm trying to provoke that is it a blessing in disguise for transformation, for IT adoption, and all other areas. So I will change the order a bit just to make it more interesting. So please don't mind. So let me start with Nilant. Is this crisis a blessing in disguise for the BFSI sector?
The straight cut answer will be no, because BFSI sector, particularly we as a housing finance company, depends on the supply of the new property. If that doesn't come through, my business is at standstill. So I won't call it certainly a blessing in disguise, because my input is not there. What will be my throughput? However, working from home challenge, working in a different way from an IT perspective, certainly it has thrown up a challenge, and we as IT folks definitely found a new way to work on, and new challenges are thrown up, which we have coped it up well, and it has given a further opportunity to refine and make them more realistic and a most compliant going forward is my take. But certainly it is not a blessing in disguise if you look at end-to-end business.
Yes.
Because we exist only because of business, not otherwise.
Yes. Thank you, Nilan. Mr. Bhasin, your perspective on this provocative question.
I think from the future perspective, it's it will be a lot of blessing, because one that a lot of processes will get digitized. So digitization acceleration will be faster. A lot of acceleration we will get from all the corners for pushing people, as well as I think the talent will be really with this. We will be able to get the talent, much better talent from anywhere. If we just look at for domestic scenario only, so you don't need to really now ask people to relocate. Say you get a better talent in Bangalore, you can start making them work from Bangalore. The no need to, they can have only a few days in a month, or maybe only for most important meetings. Sometimes they need to visit on site. Otherwise, in pretty much 90% time they can work from remote. Those kind of constructs will come, and as well as nowadays, if you look in the metro cities in India, the reality cost was going skyrocketing, especially in Mumbai and Delhi and in Chennai as and Hyderabad and Bangalore. These so the key cities. So definitely the new models will come up. People will start moving to the suburbs, and the realty prices, the housing prices will change. The pattern of buying, will be changing of real estate. And I think it is good that people will be working from remote, so the various sustainability goals of the corporates and carbon footprint and all those things will be more easily met because of the not burning the fuels, and the work-life balance wise as well, it will be much better for the staff. And a lot of talented, when we look at DNI initiatives, so a lot of staff used to go away at certain a certain event in their lives, and now they can, I think, be re-employed. So in terms of be it as a call center industry or business process industry or IT industry, there will not be a shortage of talent. Rather, more talent will come. More talent pool will grow to for the workforce, and there will be a lot of exciting opportunities for some people who don't want to work full time for one organization. They can have a multiple assignments as well while working remote. So those kind of models will also coming in. So net, I see that it will be a from various perspectives in a positive side, but however there is a corollary that people are supervisory role, people are finding that staff is sitting at home just because there are compulsions for people to sit at home and they can't do anything. So hence they are sitting in front of the screens. So it will be the how the behavior will change once the we start going towards near normal situation. So whether people would really like to work from home, and how the human behavior will change. But as I said, I think behavior will be really dependent on the culture, and what various panelists have already told, the how empathetic is the the overall operating environment when people are working from remote. That will drive whether work from home will sustain, or it will stay, but it may not go either side of the stream. It may remain midway somewhere.
Sure. Thank you, Shiv and Bhasin ji. May I request Manu to please respond on this?
Sure. Dr. Ravi, very frankly, from an emotional perspective, I would definitely not want to associate any word called blessing with this disease, right? At an emotion perspective. But if I look at the opportunity, right? I think it all depends on whether we will be able to retain the new muscle that we built in this crisis. There is also a saying that the relationships and the connects that are built in the most difficult times tend to be the strongest, right? And I'm hoping that the muscle that we build as an organization in terms of new processes, tools, methodologies, if they are here to stay, even in the post-COVID world, when everything normalizes, probably it'll lead to a very differentiated and a very, very, very positive sort of an outcome. The only fear that I have is that if all of us regress to the older ways, once the immediate stress goes away, then it will be a lost opportunity for sure, right? And just to summarize from a relationship perspective, I see an implication far beyond the organizations as well. And I really figure, how do interpersonal relationships change in the post-COVID world, right? A lot of the consumer behavior, especially in the industry I come from, unfortunately, I only hold up my part of the promise in the saddest moments of my customers' lives, right? As life insurance. So a big question that we have to also think from a society perspective is that when in the post-COVID world, how will these interpersonal relationships change? How will the trust factors change, right? So there's a lot of the unknown there, very frankly. But as far as organizations, process, technology, digital, AI, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. I hope that opportunity would have surfaced in a different way, but it definitely presents an opportunity for building a permanent new muscle that we can use in the future.
Thank you, Manu. And I will request Sreeram Iyer to give a perspective, and also your perspective will be the concluding remarks of this session.
All right, that puts some pressure. To avoid repeating what was already covered, I might just say to your provocative question, Doctor, that I genuinely believe it is a blessing, but it is not a blessing in disguise. It is a blessing which is very visible. It's only the virus which is in disguise, and it's for us to figure out what is visible and what to catch and what to keep with us, to Manu's point, and not lose what is, what are the good parts of this. The other thing which is visible and which is a blessing is the industry that I come from, which is banking, is generally and mostly for right reasons beaten up for wrong practices or bad practices or many aspects which are in the negative quadrant. But when it comes to personal health crisis such as this one, moving on to economic crisis, which might happen as we all think it will, and preventing anything downstream from a financial impact point of view, banks play a big part in this whole ecosystem. So I think it's a blessing for banking to walk tall and to demonstrate leadership to be able to manage and contribute to the recovery of the economy. So I think it's a huge blessing, and if we can keep up our leadership balance, then I think it's very visible.
Great. So with this, we have come to the end of the panel. Almost 1 hour we have had this discussion. I thank all the panelists for joining us and giving your valuable time here. And thank you all the audience, like around 86 people are right now watching us. This video will be available on YouTube in next 2-3 days. I will request each of the viewers, if you like it, please share it with your network, so that great ideas which have got generated here are reach out to larger number of audience. With this, I thank all the panelists, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.